Good afternoon, and thank you for a wonderful lunch to everyone that served our lunch and prepared that. Thank you so much. My name is Paula Lemke, and I am here with an excellent panel to discuss workforce and the pipeline that we need in order to achieve national security needs. So we're going to start with our first question, and the first question will go to each of you because each of you have your own distinct area and views. So we hear a lot about the workforce shortage in defense manufacturing, but from where each of you sit, if you all want to tell us what that looks like for you.
We're involved in shipbuilding and ship repair, depot maintenance. And when you look at the situation in our shipyards and our both do new construction and do depot maintenance, there's a serious shortage of skilled trades labor. The shortage is come about because of two things: the disastrous Last Supper in 1993, where we decided it was the end of all war and canceled the Defense Department. And then the second thing is we're aging out the workforce that's stuck through and been in the workforce. And then adding to this, which I'm sure Molly will talk about, has been a change in the attitudes of education over the decades that has de-emphasized young men and women going into the skilled trades. So there are lots of solutions to this skilled trade shortage, which is in the hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about, not talking about 5 or 10, we're talking about hundreds of thousands. And so our company has been in this business for a long time, all of our people, and we're looking at it and we try to take the different kind of view, come at it in a different direction, be less conventional, a little bit more innovative. And if you look at it, you know, you have to invest in early education and different levels of skill and training. But we said the immediate problem can be solved most easily by going and finding, using unconventional approaches, the experienced people that are available today. It's a near-term immediate solution. It's not the long-term solution, but it's like you've got a gaping, sucking chest wound, you've got to put a bandage on it or you're going to die. So we're the immediate solution. We've got an innovative approach, which I'll talk about, I'm sure, over time, to address this with experienced people being redirected from other applications.
Ed, that's hard to follow. Gaping chest wound, going to die. I'll try and follow that. Molly Dodge, I have the honor of serving as Senior Vice President of Workforce at Ivy Tech. Ivy Tech is Indiana's statewide community college with 19 campuses, 41 sites. We serve about 215,000 students. 100,000 of those are in high school, earning college credits while in high school to qualify either to enter post-secondary or directly enter the workforce. Ivy Tech is singly accredited, and the reason why that's important in the state of Indiana is that we can add programs seamlessly across the state. So I think where we're seeing gaps and what we're doing to address them, but we're seeing gaps obviously in the skilled trades, but also CNC and welding, additive manufacturing, and then we're also working hand in glove with Applied Research Institute, our economic development, statewide and regional, to develop brand new pathways as Indiana attracts semiconductor production, increased life sciences production, smart manufacturing, and then we have specialty programs, and this is how we fill gaps as community colleges. When employers let us and build with us and co-create with us, we can create at the community college level everything from skills-based training to stackable credentials to an associate degree. And one of those programs that we have is in cybersecurity at Muscatatuck Urban Training Center. It's an accelerated program in our nationally recognized cybersecurity program across the state. And it really gives students the opportunity to explore defense as a field and immerse themselves in Camp Atterbury and the Urban Training Center. And so I say that to say, employers in the room, if you don't know your community college, if you don't know your particular subject matter expert in education, it's a worthwhile endeavor to meet that person, talk to that person, and co-create with them.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Paula, and thank you, everybody, and thank you, Sagamore, for bringing this event together, yesterday's event together, and certainly this topic to the forum, maybe to help set the context for the next hour in response to your question. And Molly, you touched on it, because it really does take a village. How about some numbers? Ed, you started to touch on them. There are, if you know, whether you look at Bureau of Labor Statistics or some of the NAM or Deloitte reporting, right? I think we've all heard some of these figures, 12.5 million North American manufacturing jobs. It is predicted actually to expand between now and 2033 by another 3.5 million jobs, bringing us to about 16 million manufacturing jobs in our country by 2033. That will bring us not back to, but much closer to what we saw at our high point in manufacturing way back in 1979, which was about 19.5 million jobs. So a sense of some of the decline or contraction that we've experienced that Ed referenced, where we sit now at 12.5 million manufacturing jobs. Now here's where the news isn't so great. As of today, whether you're looking at some of the BLS or NAM reporting, the Manufacturing Institute will call it about 450,000 to 500,000 of those 12.5 million are unfilled today. So we're going to start getting into a conversation around skills gaps. We're going to start getting into a conversation around attraction and training and upskilling. But obviously, you know, the question that all of us are keenly aware of is what is the impact on national security, industrial base resiliency, not to mention just the health of our communities and our families when we have those unfilled jobs. The unfilled jobs between now and 2033, even though the number of jobs will increase, so will the gap. And the current forecast of today is that we will have upwards of 2 million unfilled manufacturing jobs as part of that 16 million forecast. So this is a rapidly deteriorating condition. My organization, SME, is a 100-year-old nonprofit out of Detroit, and among other things, while we bring forward a lot of the emerging technologies out across the industrial base, we are keenly focused on collaborating, not only on a national scale, to bring the demand signals down from the War Department, for example, on what those critical job roles will be today and tomorrow across our defense industrial base, but what is it that the schools and the pipelines will need by levers of vehicles to be able to respond en masse to a national issue, but at a local and a regional level, knowing that what works in Mobile, Alabama, and the shipyards may not necessarily work for Detroit and the auto plants or the ground vehicle systems, or in Everett in aerospace. So I'll stop with that with some opening framing, and Paula, look very much to supporting the conversation today.
Ed, you started to touch on, you have a unique workforce model that you've kind of developed, and so we'd like you to tell us a little bit more about that and why it's been so successful.
Well, I'm the ancient mariner. I've been to sea a lot. And when you go to sea, excuse me, you leave your family, excuse me, and deploy, and you come home and you take time off. And it got me to thinking, I'm also not only a Navy guy, I'm a merchant marine officer, and same thing is true for them. And they rotate more regularly, actually, than the military does. And then you think about other applications like offshore oil platforms down in the Gulf of America, and the crews are flown out there for 2-3 week periods. They work, they do the job, they come home and they rotate. So we said, there are, talking about what Dr. Hendricks said earlier this morning, people in the Midwest don't want to move. People in lots of different parts of the country have deep family roots, they don't want to move. And yet the jobs that we have to fill, particularly in shipbuilding, and the ones we've been filling are in Groton, Connecticut, Hampton Roads, Virginia, Pascagoula, Mississippi, all the big shipbuilding locations. When you think about that, those labor pools in those areas are completely fished out. The only thing that's available in those areas is completely green labor coming right out of high school or community college. And you got to invest in those people. You got to build that workforce. But those people are far less productive in the first 3 to 5 years of their employment. And what we really need is, Jerry had a chart he's got of how far behind all of our shipbuilding programs are in the U.S. There isn't one that's within a year of being on time. They're all at least 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 years behind schedule. 16 years to build an aircraft carrier? Come on, give me a break. We need more labor. And so to address the immediate gaping chest wound and realizing that this business is really heavily dominated by union labor, not that they're all union. For instance, Mobile, Alabama, Austal's not union. General Dynamics in Quonset Point, Rhode Island is not union, but virtually all the rest of them are. And they most accept union labor coming in. Plus the unions actually, if you don't fight with them and decide to partner with them, they actually bring some things to the party, to the table. They have good training programs, they have good apprentice programs, their certifications, they keep records on where their people work. And in many of these shipyard skills, there are 17 unions within the AFL-CIO that are part of what's called the Metal Trades Department. And each of those unions has some involvement. For instance, the UA union, which is one of the largest. Who ever heard of the United Alliance? Well, it's the pipe fitters and the plumbers and the steam fitters and the steam test technicians and a whole bunch of others. It's a very large union, okay? Air conditioning, and then sheet metal. That's the SMART union. It's also the union that handles railroad stuff. I mean, the unions, don't ask me to explain how they organize themselves. They did. But there's 17 of them in the Metal Trades Department. So we partnered with the Metal Trades Department of the AFL-CIO and said, look, we want to take some of your people that are not in shipyards and recruit them from other parts of the country. They all have to be U.S. citizens because we're working on military ships. And we will treat them as if they're going to an offshore oil platform or deployment on a ship. Live here, work there. That's the idea. And so we proposed this. The Navy said, we got to do something different. We did a prototype test low-rate initial production program down at Newport News, building the future USS Enterprise, CVN-80. We're currently up in Groton, Connecticut, building a little submarine called the District of Columbia, the next strategic missile submarine. And we're gearing up right now to deploy to Ingalls Shipyard down in Pascagoula, Mississippi. The interesting thing is we're put a lot of shipbuilding projects are on the Gulf Coast. It's Austal, it's Ingalls, it's the new icebreakers over in Texas, it's Bollinger. They're making some tugboats for the Navy, Eastern Shipbuilding on the Panama and the Panhandle of Florida. All these shipyards down there, and yet there's not enough labor. So we're about to make a major deployment, in this case of pipe fitters, down to Ingalls Shipyard as a prototype for them. The thing that attracts these people, we call it our rotational workforce, is they're road warriors, so we have to pay them travel expenses, which adds to the labor rate, but you got to deal with what you got to deal with. But they really want to get a lot of overtime. If you're going to travel, we've got one guy that's been working with us since the beginning from the middle of Texas. He worked at Newport News with us. He's up in Connecticut now. And those guys are Boilermakers. They're structural welders, welding the hull and all the other structural parts of the ship. And what they want is a lot of overtime. They're going to be on the road. They don't want to sit in the hotel and watch reruns on Netflix or something. They want to work and book it and bank it. And then when they take their time off, they want to go be with their family or take the vacation or whatever, and then come back. And we've proven the model. We've got a number of these people that have come, worked, took time off, come back, and we're about to expand the program, and we're about to expand it into the naval shipyards. And I think this thing is going to end up being a near-term solution for a long-term problem. This will not be the complete solution because I'm competing against guys that would otherwise be going to work on data center construction or other things, other industrial things, other construction, but it's working, it's competitive, and we're expanding the program. So just a different way to provide an immediate solution while we spin up with the community colleges and other sources and training to redeploy people to the different locations.
Yeah, Ed's point's very well taken, and I think, you know, given what Dan shared in terms of where we are in terms of vacancies and the demand for these jobs, we're going to have to implement both long and short-term strategies. And at the community college, to Ed's point, our graduates are often, you know, coming right out of our classrooms with less industry experience. But the way we're trying to bridge that is through apprenticeship and earn and learn models. And in Indiana, we have sent hundreds of people to Switzerland to understand the Swiss and German style of apprenticeship. We are bringing those learnings back to our state to create equivalent pathways between apprenticeship and high school and college equivalency. At Ivy Tech, we have about 15,000 apprentices, and I'm proud to say that they're all degree-connected apprenticeship. So students want college credit, they want degrees, but we also want this earn and learn model where students actually learn skills while they're in the classroom, and then we're speeding their time to competency in the workplace. It's not perfect, but we are expanding these models, as I mentioned, in high school and then to other sectors other than the skilled trades. So we have apprenticeship sponsorships in fields like IT and cybersecurity, in healthcare, also working on mechanical, electrical apprenticeship as well across the manufacturing industry.
Thank you. And just staying with apprenticeships for a moment, and then I thought I'd offer something else too. The tremendous opportunity here with the Sagamore Institute is, as we heard from David yesterday, for those of you who are there and those of you who are familiar with what's been growing over the last couple of years, is really we all know that there are incredible resources here in the Great Lakes regions. We have amazing employers, we have amazing schools. Ivy Tech is a best-in-class community college model, really empowered largely because they are a statewide community college system, which allows them to lever those demand signals down from industry, down from the War Department in some cases, and provide more rapid, standardized, aligned curriculum and programming, which includes outreach and awareness, which we'll get to on this panel, I'm sure, but also the connectivity down to industry. But my comment on apprenticeships and the opportunity with Sagamore is that part of Sagamore's mission and outcome will be to, on the behalf of all of you in the room here in the Midwest, help inform and advise and influence more favorable policy. And for those of us who are in the workforce development space, apprenticeships is currently in the crosshairs in a very good way, because as we're already talking here, we know that earn-to-learn programs, when done well, as we are seeing in other societies, can be a very powerful and effective way of accelerating competency and alignment and filling skills gap at the same time. But employers in the current legislative model framework have some considerable headwinds and barriers regarding apprenticeships. And so the comment here is nothing more than to say, with a community like this, we have an opportunity to be voice of industry, voice of Midwest, voice of all of the resources to help go from good to great, in this example, apprenticeships. And maybe I'll just quickly then, if I could, again to help set some of the visualization here, and this is the way we look at it at SME, and that actually aligns very much with Secretary Cadenazzi's organization within industrial-based policy. He has his IBAS office, which has By the way, if I could, on behalf of all of us in the workforce development space, just acknowledge and offer kudos to what we have been the privilege of receiving over the last couple of years, which has been more transparency and more clarity and more collaboration from DoD, DoW, and in this example, IBAS, Industrial Base Policy, Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment, where a lot of the career pathways, the skills needed across our defense industrial base, whether it's CNC machining, additive manufacturing, robotics, non-destructive test, or also the emerging portfolio, the burgeoning portfolio around critical minerals, mining, right? Something that really hasn't been mainstay in our education pipelines. We are getting greater transparency and velocity from the War Department for helping inform those of us tasked with scaling the mission and the priorities on behalf of the defense industrial base. And so to Secretary Cadenassi, to Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment, with a bouquet over to DeVries and the group over at Mantech on the R&E side, where in the example of Manufacturing USA Innovation Institutes, I'll just pick one of the 18 America Makes for those of you close to additive manufacturing, together with SME and together with the community college system, are able to define those bodies of knowledge, create those industry credentials, and lever the necessary skills, curriculum, to develop the necessary skills into these education vehicles. And so I'll close on this rant, forgive me, by saying the way we look at workforce development, and Cadenassi and Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment looks at it, is primarily three pillars. They add a little more resolution. We have talent, that's the bar stock, that's the kids, that's the youth that we need to identify, we need to engage, we need to recruit, we need to provide awareness, we need to expose these careers in manufacturing, and it's through the collaborations between the community colleges and the industrial base that we can move from good to great. Two, it's the workforce development system, the schools, the high schools, the community colleges, the VOTECs, but it's just as involved, it's social services. We have a great example here in Ohio. Jobs Ohio is a very powerful and effective economic development organization that brings these kinds of priorities together on behalf of industry. I'm talking about academic, I'm talking about investment, I'm talking about industrial base. But then, yes, talent, educational system, and the customer, the employers themselves. We can do all of this work aligning with demand signals, reaching the next generation of workers, and we can accelerate the education systems, but we need to do a better job supporting the industrial base to create the necessary cultures, practices, and competency, not only to receive that talent and to retain that talent, which is more and more tied with aligning to all of these emerging technologies. Ed, your platforms and systems are evolving rapidly, day by day, week by week, year by year. And so, yes, you have a burden to keep your talent aligned to all those technologies, but you also, the employers are so desperately needed to engage out to the left, into the pipelines, to inform their local communities of the demand signals, to open up their doors, raise the brand for manufacturing, raise the brand for their own career opportunities at their own companies. And so with that, I'll close, but the three-headed model is something that many of us in the workforce development sphere are currently mobilizing together on. Thank you.
In order to do that, I feel like we have to kind of discuss that there is kind of a perception, a misperception maybe, with manufacturing careers that maybe parents and young don't think that is what they want to go into for whatever reason. How do we overcome that? Or are we doing that in some way, shape, or form?
So,
Just changing the perception.
yeah, it's a great question, and we heard a little bit about that yesterday. In fact, Ed and I were sitting next to each other, and I said, oh no, you stole my talking points. But it's worth repeating that there continues to be a misperception about manufacturing careers and the environments in which manufacturers are offering, which is becoming more IT than manufacturing in some cases. And I think the way we do that is to bring the employer ever closer to the educational system, as Dan just said. We, in addition to bringing the employer onto our 19 campuses for interaction with students under the premise that they will not hire our students until they complete their first educational credential, and that's always a great conversation to have, but what we want is what's best for the student and the employer. But it's also putting our faculty into industry. And I would say that community college faculty, the great majority of our faculty come from industry, but the way and the pace in which industry is changing, our faculty need continuous upskilling themselves, and they need exposure in these environments. So teacher externships are becoming part of our sabbatical policy, where we have a systematic way of embedding faculty into these environments to understand what skills and competencies are needed and to build those career pathways into businesses within the industry.
I'd just say that in our area, we're specifically dealing with Navy shipbuilding. And first of all, the interruption in shipbuilding, the drop in shipbuilding cost us more than I think most people realize off the top. Because in the shipyard, and I've been in shipyards for decades, there's family tradition. And, sons follow fathers, daughters, your family is in the shipyard. It's a community, and it's a deep-rooted pride in the delivery of ships. You go up to Connecticut. I worked at that shipyard in Connecticut, Electric Boat, and most of those guys will tell you, when we built the Casimir Pulaski, it took us 18 months, start to finish, for a ballistic missile submarine. Now that was in the 1960s, when the U.S. Navy took delivery of a new submarine. On average, for an 8-year period, every 44 days, a new submarine was delivered to the U.S. Navy for an 8-year period, during the period when we were building the so-called 41 for Freedom. We built all those ballistic missile submarines, plus a bunch of attack submarines in parallel. We need to recapture that spirit. But I will tell you that for the people coming to us from Iowa, Texas, Montana, Puerto Rico, wherever we recruit them from in the unions, we do an indoctrination and introduction session for them before they go to the shipyard. And we have something called a bridge course to bridge commercial skills to the shipyard skills and to improve the uptake rate in the shipyard, because it's a very different environment than working in a commercial power plant even, where a lot of our Boilermakers have experience. But there is a sense of pride in building a ship. I tell these guys, you are building a ship that, in the case of the ones that we're working on the Enterprise, it's going to be in service for 50 years. What you're doing, every sailor, the tens of thousands of sailors are going to sail that ship for 50 years, are dependent upon you, your skill, and what you do right now today, because that may be the difference someday, 40 years from now, when the ship is nearing the end of its life. How well did you do your job? And there is an immense pride in this workforce. And one of the things that we're working to do that we think needs to be done more is to recapture, and this America 250 business that's going on, it fits right into this whole thing. Pride in America, pride in shipbuilding, pride in supporting national security. You cannot underestimate that. You can say, well, it doesn't matter, whatever. The people want to feel proud of what they're doing. It's a career, you're committing your life to it, it's important, it matters to the security of the nation. And even though they're not putting on the uniform and going to sea, I always tell these guys, because, not only I sail in the Navy, I'm a shipbuilder, okay, that every mission in the United States Navy, every single mission in the United States Navy started with a shipbuilder. Every mission started with a shipbuilder. So every sailor at sea, there's a shipbuilder behind him somewhere. So showing the sense of pride and building the sense of pride in the skilled trades. The other thing is, do you want to spend 4 years of your life and have $100,000 of debt and be unable to get a good job? Or do you want to leave your technical school and go get a job and make $100,000 in the first year? That's a choice as well.
I just also want to point out when you were talking about how it took us 18 months to build a ship. In 2024, China built more ships than we have since World War II. And that was just in 2024. I would hate to see what they've done since. But so it's very important what you're talking about for national security efforts, that we are able to fill these positions and make the ships. We need to make the ships. Dan, did you have anything that you wanted to add on changing perceptions?
No, but just while we're talking on the example of submarines, the Columbia class, as I understand it, is the largest man-made weapon ever constructed, and it can be defined by different metrics, but I think one of them is just the number of components, the number of parts. And when you layer in that some of those parts are digital and cyber and software, and as we've already been hearing on all the panels, just all of the challenges with interoperability as it might impact both upstream design and downstream manufacturing and sustainment, right? There's no shortage of humbling reasons to appreciate the tremendous task of building that machine. And so I very much appreciate your comparison to previous platforms. I have the privilege of residing next door to the Museum of Science and Industry on the south side of Chicago, and 20 years with SME. And I get to admire that German U-boat that they have restored down in the basement. And of course, I think of Das Boot, if you're all familiar, and how all those bolts held as it lay on the floor of the Mediterranean. And it just goes back to, yes, it's desperately vital that the manufacturing is done right. Lives are at stake. So not meaning to take it too much off path, but maybe just to remind everyone that amidst all of the arsenal, certainly submarines remaining as a kind of tip of spear in many ways as part of our defense strategy, are also desperately threatened and weakened because of the workforce challenges that we're laying out today. All of you know that.
And I think what you're hearing, Paula, is obviously we're up here, we're workforce professionals, and we are talking about creating pathways to careers. But I think what you're hearing is, especially in this sector, that our students need to understand the why. These aren't just jobs, they aren't just skills. It's the why of the work that's being done to support the defense industry and this sector. And that's the compelling case to make, especially to Gen Z students who really want to understand not only is the education they're receiving going to produce a return on investment to them personally, but is the career that they're aiming for going to produce fulfillment in their lives? And I think that that's a story that this sector in particular can tell. I think Ed should make a video for sure, but I think that we shouldn't underestimate the power of explaining the why.
So here's a question. We've talked about the different states and kind of what they're doing, and in the Midwest, specifically, we have a good tradition, but how do we not compete as states with the talent? How are we, or how should we, or could we be working together to continue growing and working strategy to get these positions filled?
I'll give one quick example. Obviously, as the states, our mission at Ivy Tech is dual focused. We're higher education and we're workforce development for the state of Indiana. However, as we look at the emerging industries that we've attracted to the Midwest, like semiconductor, what we have been able to do as a region, as a Midwest region, in terms of NSF and other federal funding opportunities, is to create standard curriculum so that we could stand up programs faster. And they were, you know, this is both at the community college level and at the four-year level. And as these skills sort of rapidly change within industry, industry doesn't know state boundaries often. So there is an opportunity for the educational system to work across states to ensure that the skills and competencies we're embedding in this curriculum are actually relevant and staying current. And the development of that curriculum together really accelerates our opportunity to scale.
I'll tell you that the federal government has a role here, too. I will echo what Zach from Anduril said earlier today, that my company's headquartered in Cleveland, up the road here, for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with the availability of the workforce. And we've got, you know, I have a son who lives in Phoenix. You want to talk about a problem? They have no water in Phoenix. They have more people than they have water. We've got all the water in the world, right? So we've got water, we've got electrical power, we've got transportation, and we've got workforce. It's a great place to work. But from the federal government point of view, the executive order that came out in the early part of this administration and talked about maritime prosperity zones instigated a number of us companies that are related to the maritime business. Patrick from Fraser Shipbuilding and Fincantieri and us and Don John over in Erie. A bunch of us companies have been collaborating on talking about how we can work together to take advantage of what we believe was going to be designated as a prosperity zone across the Great Lakes region to help our area give some incentive to work together. And as Dr. Hendricks talked about this morning in the evolution of the shipbuilding plan that's now before Congress, this latest version of it, but the 123 ships either approved or submitted in this administration, those ships have to be built and the companies have to work together. So that is by nature across state lines in this maritime prosperity zone. And when you look at it, the Great Lakes has a lot of commonality and a lot of same approaches. I mean, Cleveland is kind of more like New York than Chicago, but it's all the Midwest, and we ought to work together. So I don't think the state lines from a company point of view are a boundary to us.
So,
You know, I'll just respond to the issue of brain drain. Maybe I'll respond that way. So, you know, we invest in a lot to recruit and educate, and we'd like to see those graduates and those new entering the job field to stay in the community, stay in the state, stay in the Great Lakes. And it goes back a little bit to what I said before about employer engagement, certainly working within their own four walls, but also back out to the left to provide that collaboration with economic development and education pipelines. And in the process, as they are raising awareness around careers manufacturing, building a local brand and a destination in their own communities, they can be a little more proactive, addressing some of that brain drain. And to your previous good question, Paula, it's certainly a key vehicle in kind of winning hearts and minds when we start talking about not only identifying and finding available talent in our pipelines, but oftentimes those conversations also need to be had with those career counselors in the high schools, for example, who also are maybe ignorant of the not only the opportunities at an industry scale, but right in their own backyards, not to their own fault. Again, this is the opportunity for employers to work out to the left, and beyond the career counselors and academic advisors in the education system, what about the dining room table conversations where maybe the strongest resistance to careers in manufacturing come from the parents who maybe saw their grandparents ground to a pulp working at the foundry for all their years and not having much to show for it when they were done, for example. And so there are lots of headwinds around the awareness and winning hearts and minds as it relates to attracting a diverse and inclusive net, casting a diverse and inclusive net representative of all of our citizens for opportunities in manufacturing. Because if you go back to the numbers that we opened with, the numbers do not add up. We have some of the largest generations of labor leaving the industry, and we have some of the smallest headcount of labor coming into our industry, and manufacturing is competing with hospitality and healthcare and food service and transportation and Walmart and everything in between for a headcount that just is not going to meet that 2 million shortfall. So yes, winning hearts and minds is key, and employer engagement is key, and certainly keeping folks from brain drain is part of the advantage if it's done well.
One final point about regionalism versus states, and I can't believe I missed this, or we all missed this, we all just assumed it, but forums like this and organizations like Sagamore with Jay and Rob and everyone, this is how you get regionalized as opposed to just hyper-focused on your small little location in the area. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of students coming out of college now, and they're not getting jobs right away. They're having a hard time finding jobs, a lot of them. Have you seen any of those students now saying, hey, maybe this is a good option for me? Or has that been something that has been considered as a place to go looking?
So, yes, and Ivy Tech is, it's interesting. We have stackable credentials that are academic in nature, and we have been approached by industry to actually create reskill pathways or credentials to offer to a four-year graduate to actually teach them the skills that they need for the career pathway that they're interested in. So we have received those employer demand signals in some cases where a student may have a particular degree in biology or chemistry, but not the skills to do the job that industry's looking for. And so community colleges can perform that function as well, that sort of reskilling or skill-based training that can be offered through our academic credentials, or now with Workforce Pell being a tool in our toolbox, we can co-create with employers boot camps and skill-based training that's short-term, where students can access still their Pell or their financial aid to participate and get the skills that they need for a particular career.
So as I hear you talk, and Ed, I'm going to maybe tee this up for you as our case study, if I might. And what I want to talk about are these new jobs that are emerging as a result of these new job fields around. We put in Industry 4.0, we put in cyber physical systems. We heard a little bit earlier today about systems engineering. The War Department is prioritizing a more integrated mission engineering methodology. And so when we think about some of these career pathways and embracing, or maybe an example of our shipbuilder here, migrating and growing talent from Industry 3.0 to more of some of these cyber careers, what have been maybe some of your experiences or lessons learned?
Well, I got to tell you that this is a little bit of a stumper for me, because we've been hyper-focused on experienced skilled trades people, and we haven't really addressed this problem yet. We are working to develop some new industrial facilities to be built up here in Northeast Ohio, and as we do that, I know we're going to have to address this issue, and it's going to be coming at us four square. And just to give you an idea of the way we're thinking, staffing these new facilities, because of the nature of what we're going to be doing in them, which is industrial things associated with shipbuilding and depot maintenance, we're actually going to turn ourselves on our head and go recruit people in Northeast Ohio and send them away to places that do that type of work now as we increase the scope and scale of the workforce, and then bring them back, kind of a reverse rotational workforce. But with regard to the reskilling for some of these other skills, I can tell you from my experience, I ran a controls business where we made controls for nuclear reactors for the Navy, and all the way down to programming circuit cards and, you know, making the cards themselves. And in that business, we were constantly dealing with skill changes, and even the manufacturing technology of how you make a circuit card is radically different than it was 25 years ago. So all that has to be taken in stride as you go.
So now we have a few minutes left, so if there's any questions in the crowd that you would like to ask the panel?
So you spoke earlier about bar stock and how to pull it in. For the defense industry in particular, there's an inclination of, I mean, if you were to ask the general workforce in any of the defense industry companies now, whether they either served as a veteran or grew up in a veteran's family or had a relationship, by the time you kind of ask those two questions, you probably get 90% of the hands in the air. What can be done specifically to kind of tap into that community, look for bar stock to bring into the defense and aerospace industry?
Actually, the Department of War has a program called Skill Bridge, which a number of the unions that we participate with in our program are actively working to do that. And there's terrible with names, there's an organization out in San Diego that's active that we're involved with, and I can't remember the name of the organization, where they're taking people out of active duty, enlisted guys, and training them over for skills in the workforce. So I think a lot of that's going on now, although I will tell you that a lot of the union folks we're recruiting, they don't have any military background. Once again, this is the situation. But I would agree with you that is a potent source. For instance, when the Virginia-class submarine, I led the original design of that, and I radically changed the way electrical power was done on that ship. And the company I ran in Milwaukee was building the equipment to make it work. And we were worried that this new technology wouldn't work well with the sailors on the ship. So we went out and actively recruited some nuclear qualified electricians mates who would be the guys operating this on the ship to run our test lab as we developed the equipment. So bringing military people in is absolutely an important source, but it's not the sole source.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And we work very closely with our Veterans Services Administration in Indiana. We have a very robust military credit crosswalk. And while we may not have had the opportunity to evaluate the curriculum and skills being taught in the military in some of these pathways, we partner with organizations like ACE and CALE who have viewed that curriculum, and we accept their recommendations so that individuals with military experience enter Ivy Tech, and we award them credit seamlessly for the knowledge and skills that they have mastered. I think it's a critical pipeline. It also is an attraction effort that our state is investing in to bring more people to Indiana because of these pathways into good careers.
And I'll just quickly add, because Skills Bridge and transitioning service is a desperately vital part of the bar stock, but if part of your question was also how can we widen the messaging to offer an opportunity to serve our country without necessarily putting on a uniform, but maybe sharing a kind of passion and devotion to serving and working with your hands. Secretary Cadenazzi, forgive me for stealing any thunder, but as we start to see more from Operation Build Freedom as it rolls out here, I think it officially went live, so I don't think I'm telling any stories here. I hope. Here come the drones. This will be our administration's national campaign to promote careers in manufacturing and an opportunity to build for the defense industrial base.
Other questions?
Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Lillibridge from Mission Design and Automation. Do a lot of robotics. Wanted to ask you guys a question where the manufacturing workforce, really if you train on skilled trades, you probably won't have enough people to fill all the positions. Are you looking at training towards automation roles, automation and robotics roles, where people become a multiplier within the factory? If you look at China's industrial base, they have a lot of people, but they also have deployed more robots than any other country in the last few years. So how are you focusing on teaching and training people to use and implement automation so they can be a multiplier and run 10 systems instead of just one?
I'll start, but there's much that both of these organizations can say. The answer is absolutely yes. Robotics and automation is the future, right? Back to the Manufacturing USA Innovation Institutes, which is one of my touch points into the heat lamp that defines not only the opportunity, but through its consortia. This is private-public partnership, which we heard earlier today. It can be a nice vehicle with these institutes. War Department funded Manufacturing USA Innovation Institute, ARM, out of Carnegie and Mill 19 in Pittsburgh, 300 robotics members and academia, SME, community colleges, MEPs, Apex, everybody, industry coming together to, in the example of workforce development, understand the competencies, understand the job roles of the future that can then be defined and built out by competencies of the future, which can then inform curriculum of the future, which can then inform programming and content and capstones and outcomes measurement of the future. So yes, the work is being done. All of us in industry know that, and the headcount number, and I think you alluded to it, is actually a driver of automation, not to mention all of the incredible ROI and performance that lay over the horizon for us to catch up on shipbuilding, et cetera, and car building and everything else, Detroit, where we're from. So the short answer is yes. I'll let these folks share some more about maybe some of the robotics programs that you're putting in place.
So yes, and to just add the short-term solution while we're building is again to really bring the voice of industry into our operation. And when we get those demand signals, we adjust our academic curriculum. We also have the ability, if employers are willing to invest in the individuals that they're upskilling for these roles, we can allow employers to build their own degrees at Ivy Tech. And they can pick from electives, they can choose particular skills that they're looking for. The student stays on an academic path, they earn academic credit towards a degree, but that employer can customize the degree path to the extent that they need those specialty roles within their facility. It's been a great tool, and we see that as sort of education of the future, where both students and employers are going to start curating their own educational journeys through community college. This is the future, where a student will come to us and say, this is my job, here's my employer, here's my individual development plan, here's the role I'm seeking, and how do I get there? And we let the student and employer build that pathway within the community college. That's the future of higher education.
There's another approach too, which is to eliminate the need for the job. And just give you an example, one of the skills that we keep getting asked to go find is certified, qualified, non-destructive test technicians. It's particularly an acute problem with the Navy associated with our older ballistic missile or Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. They're the longest serving submarines in history. And, you know, seawater is just brutal on steel over time. And when you're 4 decades in the water, you're just going to suffer some problems. So NDT is a big deal, both individual realm and then looking at radiographs for welds and other sorts of NDT. So one of the programs we're just now cracking the door on, and we've got an entree with an AI provider, is we're looking at how we can use AI to automate non-destructive test evaluations and to identify early signs, the ones that are 100% no problem, 100% a problem, and identify the ones that require the technician to look at individually. Similar to what the medical industry is using with radiography for themselves and scans. So application of AI is another approach to the workforce problem.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, panel.